that I've attempted this through services, and now with this lunch and learn. So I had a piece of matzah. I guess that's my lunch for now. So I'm feeling good. And if there's anyone out there, you can feel free to lunch, and hopefully you'll learn. The lunch is on you, and I guess the learning's on me. I think like a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people, this has been a big learning curve for me to do all of these things virtually that I'm used to doing in person. I feel like I've been shoved into the 21st century, but that's, I guess, besides the point, because most of all, I just want to make sure that everybody out there is well and feeling well and coping with this very surreal, bizarre situation that we find ourselves in, but important too, to save lives, which is obviously a huge mitzvah. And so this is a lunch and learn that I kind of dreamed up as we were trying to, just kind of reach each other. And I'm calling it From the Left Wing, which is a column that I was lucky enough to have been asked to write. It's been 10 years. It was 2010, and I think I did a monthly column for about a couple of years. It was, at the time, the Jewish Federation's either brand new website or a brand new revamped website. And they asked a group of rabbis, a number of rabbis, to write columns from different, sort of their different perspectives. And so I said I would do it, but I wanted to be able to be free to just sort of be out there and say what was on my mind and my heart. And they said, go for it. So I called it From the Left Wing. And in this case, left wing doesn't really mean political. I do have a few of the columns that, sort of that speak, that have political elements in them. But that's not what I meant. When I meant left wing was religiously. And so I'll kind of just try to describe that, what I meant by that. What is the left-right spectrum when it comes to religion? So again, like in politics, right is more conservative and left is more liberal, progressive. And so religiously speaking, I would say that, on the right end of the spectrum, and of course it's always a spectrum, that the religious traditions are as traditional as they possibly can be, to do the religion in the spirit of how it's always been perceived to have been done. On the left end of the spectrum, the left wing, it's as flexible about traditions as possible. So that's one. The second thing that I wrote down was that on the right end of the spectrum, there's more of an objection to change. I guess it goes along with number one, but there's an objection to any kind of change when it comes especially to religious rituals and traditions and customs. On the left end of the spectrum, the left wing is more open to change, and there's probably more, but just for the sake of our time together, on the right end of the spectrum, there are rigid definitions about who identifies as part of the religious denomination or the religion itself. On the left end of the spectrum, the left wing, the definition of who identifies is much more broad and open-ended. So that's a little bit of how I'm defining left wing religiously, again, not politically in this instance. And I just had a few opening sort of comments, and then my plan is to read the essays that I wrote for this column. They're not too long. I thought that I would read 2 per session. My plan is to do this Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon until I run out of essays, and then we'll see. We will not be doing this. I will not be doing this Thursday because it will conflict with our synagogue's Yisker broadcast. So we'll skip Thursday. It's also, the end of Passover for some. So I'll do 2 today, and then we'll be back next Tuesday and next Thursday. So here's some comments that I want to make off the top. Some of you know this, but not all of you. I grew up in a small but really interesting Jewish denomination called the Society for Humanistic Judaism. Humanistic Judaism is defined as communal, synagogue-based Judaism without the religious and certainly without the theistic aspects of most Jewish communal organizations or synagogues. Now, I don't identify anymore as a humanistic Jew. I guess I would identify myself more in the sort of liberal religious camp. The denominations include certainly the Reform movement, of which my synagogue that I am a rabbi at is affiliated, but also the Reconstructionist movement and the Renewal movement. But still, my experience growing up in a secular humanistic Jewish congregation informs me as a human being and as a Jew and as a rabbi. Being a humanist or growing up in humanistic Judaism has taught me that those who identify as secular or non-religious can have life journeys that are as or more meaningful, ethical, and inspiring as people who identify as being religious. Basically, what I really learned from humanistic Judaism is how to be spiritually bilingual. What I mean by that is I feel like I can translate secular language, non-religious language, into religious language and vice versa, and mean the same thing. At least having integrity within myself that I mean the same thing. I can invoke God often, or I can never or not invoke God at all and still feel that I'm conveying the same message. So because I was a humanistic Jew for a bunch of years and then sort of a liberal, progressive, religious Jew, they don't seem in conflict with each other. It's just a matter of linguistics is what I'm trying to say. And then a few more remarks of preface. This is sort of a statement. In our pluralistic, free society, to be religious or not is a choice for everyone. We call Jews who convert to Judaism Jews by choice, but really we're all Jews are Jews by choice. All people who are religious by choice. A person can seek out the denomination or congregation that works for them without being officially intimidated into or out of that choice. I say officially because people can be prejudiced, and individuals have prejudices around these things, but that's not how our religious system is set up. You should feel free to identify with or not identify with whatever denomination you find yourself attracted to. You can opt out of religion altogether. You can find non-religious communities of meaning or no communities of meaning. This freedom, specifically in the area of religion, is an incredibly positive development in human history, and we should celebrate it, not fight against it. But it also means that the only boundaries between the various traditions and faiths are really artificial. They cannot be made by governmental or even religious authorities at their heart. We all should feel free to acknowledge that there are many traditions, religious and secular, that have wisdom and blessings for the whole world. The notions of triumphalism and chauvinism, that your way is the only way or the best way and all other ways will doom their adherents to some sort of eternal punishment, and have no place in this era. Tribalism has no place in this era. We should be, in my opinion, sharing wisdom and traditions, blending others' ways into our own way and letting others blend our ways into theirs. This way, we can all increase in learning, growth, and spiritual health, which I believe leads to a healthier planet. So, that is the same page. I see friends and people are commenting, which makes me feel good. It makes me know that there's people out there listening. And this will also be a video after the live stream that anyone can watch anytime. So here we go. I'm going to read the first column, or the first essay in the column from the left wing. stories that I think I tried to make example or exemplify what I mean by left-wing Judaism, or at least my brand of left-wing Judaism. So the very first essay is called Jewish Universalism, and I'm going to read it now. Have you heard of Unitarian Universalists? They attempt to incorporate many religious teachings into their belief system. Well, I like that title, and so I consider myself to be a Jewish Universalist. The many Jewish practices, values, traditions, and teachings that I have taken on are important parts of my life. I hope to pass along all that I love about being Jewish to my children. However, I am also very clear that my allegiances are not to Judaism alone, or to the Jewish people only. I have a strong connection to all people and all peoples, to all traditions that point toward peace, love, and justice. I feel an allegiance to the whole universe itself. This year, we mark 40 years since the Apollo 11 moon landing. Obviously, parenthetically, this is all from 10 years ago, but we marked 40 years since the Apollo 11 moon landing. Only a few months earlier, in December of 1968, the crew of Apollo 8 captured a photograph that immediately became an icon. The Earth as it looks from space. I think that everyone can picture that picture. Suddenly and breathtakingly, all of the usual boundaries, national, religious, and cultural, were unmasked as ephemeral. They weren't reflected on that round blue loveliness, that planet that was brightening the darkness of space. For Universalists, seeing that photograph was proof of all that we hold dear. To believe that one's way is the only way, or to think that groups should congregate only with their own kind, is nothing but chauvinism or an outdated tribalism. Yet we do not live in outer space. So how does this Jewish universalism play out on the ground? Here's a true story. A white Christian couple from St. Louis City was close with a single mother, a Native American woman. Because of harsh and tragic life circumstances, this family adopted their friend's 3 children from this single mom. In preschool here in St. Louis, the middle child, whose name was James, befriended the only Jewish student in his class, in his preschool class. And then from that, James became avidly interested in Judaism. Eventually, when his questions persisted, his mother, honoring her son's spiritual quest, brought James to our synagogue, trying to figure out what to do with this growing interest. And so we talked at length with the family and with James, and finally concluded that slow but sure, James could give our religious school a try. And he did, and he flourished there. A few years later, his family gathered in our meditation room that we have in our synagogue, and I gave him a Hebrew name, Micah. At the same time, his adoptive parents had also kept the siblings and him connected to their native roots. In fact, James, at the time that I knew him, and maybe still, he's now in his mid-late 20s, had never cut his hair, keeping with the Ojibwe tradition. And he was a traditional dancer at powwows in the St. Louis area. So with this in mind, James also had an Ojibwe name, which was translated into English as fast as an arrow. So James started our twice-a-week Hebrew school when he got a little older, and he even returned on weekends to be a student teacher for our younger kids. When the time came, James and his family came to my office because he wanted to talk about becoming bar mitzvah. Now, James had not converted to Judaism, and therefore could not officially be considered Jewish. Actually, becoming Jewish was a decision, we all reasoned, that James would have time to make as he matured. Yet, why not have a ceremony for him to claim Judaism as one of the identities that inspired him and motivated him to be on a righteous path? So we have a Native American child raised by Christians with no Jewish family, And becoming a bar mitzvah in this situation is obviously way out of the box. Many communities would think more than twice about doing something like this. But as I reminded myself as I considered the situation, there are no boxes when we look at Earth from outer space. And so James became a bar mitzvah. He led prayers from the Siddur, and he chanted Torah and Haftorah. In the Ojibwe tradition, an individual receives 4 name changes during their lifespan. So as part of the service, the bar mitzvah service, a medicine man came to the bima, made a blessing in a native language to the 4 directions, and then gave James a new native name, befitting a bar mitzvah boy. He had been fast as an arrow, and at the bar mitzvah, and I'll never forget it, he was renamed Naga Naga Bo, which means he who stands first in Ojibwe. To close, James's Christian Catholic father recited a traditional Irish prayer. To this day, James is involved as a Jewish teen, and now he's a Jewish young adult, even in his small town where he moved to, Macomb, Illinois. And again, a parenthetical update, James visited CRC, probably a year or 2 back, and was doing really well. And so here's the last paragraph of the original essay. In our interconnected, diverse world filled with beautifully blended families and a myriad of holy paths, the only Judaism that makes sense today, to me, is one integrated with universalism, a Judaism that is in harmony with the true nature of our shared home, which in Hebrew, the word for the planet Earth is Kadur Haaretz, the ball of Earth, that same ball of Earth that the astronauts witnessed floating through space. And so that's the first essay. I want to mention that my friend Reverend Melissa Bennett was at least at one point on. She commented, and she's a wonderful example of Jewish universalism. Also, my friend Midbar, as he identifies himself, is very well-versed in Native American traditions, and I didn't know that he was going to be watching or listening, but I sure am glad that you were with us to hear that. I'm sure I've told you that story. So I'm going to read one more. This one I picked because it has to do with Passover. I'm not reading the essays in order. I wanted to read the first one first, but then I'm going to kind of choose them maybe based on, obviously, we're still in Passover. As a left-wing Jew, I will have everyone that's watching know that I will be ending Passover on Wednesday night, the end of the 7th day. As someone who observes Passover, most of the liberal Jewish world reverted to 7 days when the traditional world outside of Israel kept their 8-day celebration. That's kind of another story, but just so all of you know, if any of you were wondering, my family and I will end Passover Wednesday at sunset, end the Passover eating. And it's certainly okay if you don't keep Passover eating as, again, a left-wing Jew. So I'm going to read you my Passover essay. If you have anything you want to, if you're out there watching, if you have anything you want to comment on, I'll try to catch your comment. They kind of scroll. And so that I sometimes I miss them. I'm trying to learn how to figure that out. But if you do have a comment, if there's time, which there should be, at the end of reading this essay, I'd be glad to try to address them. I decided not to do this on Zoom. Just kind of felt like this was a better format for this. But I'd be glad to, like I said, address any comments that anyone has. And I'll do an announcement about CRC activities online for today after I finish, before I sign off, okay? So this is a Passover essay that was in the From the Left Wing column called Handcuffs at the Seder. Just over 10 years ago, 2 days before Passover, I was arrested, handcuffed, and detained in New York City's at a New York City holding cell. Imagine the phone call I had to make to my mother-in-law to tell her that my trip to Boston, which would join me with my wife, our infant daughter, and other family members at the Seder, might be delayed. An organization called Jews for Racial and Economic Justice had called for rabbis and rabbinical students, at the time I was still in rabbinical school, to join the protest at City Hall against the alleged police brutality involved in the death of an African immigrant named Amadou Diallo. Police officers had thought that Mr. Diallo matched the description of a since-captured serial rapist. Then, they thought that their suspect was reaching into his jacket pocket for a gun. The officers collectively fired 41 shots. Parenthetically, Bruce Springsteen wrote an amazing song called 41 Shots about this story, hitting the man who had come to New York from Guinea 19 times he was shot. Investigation later found no weapons on Diallo's body. The item he had pulled from his jacket was a wallet, probably searching for his ID. A number of us took part in planned nonviolent resistance efforts to try and gain more publicity for this cause, although it was very well publicized. We simply, in this one action of a group of rabbis and rabbinical students, went through the revolving door into the government offices, and we were arrested, kind of as planned, for trespassing and disturbing the peace. I found myself in a paddy wagon, heading toward a police station in Harlem, with Reverend Al Sharpton, who was organizing all the protests, with longtime activist Rabbi Balfour Brickner, and also with Rabbi Arthur Waskow, who parenthetically just visited CRC last fall, among others. Why did I decide to take action on behalf of this victim, a man who I had never met? Timing aside, I do believe the answer has an awful lot to do with Passover. The Haggadah teaches, in every generation, every human being is obligated to understand that we ourselves, not our ancestors only, came forth from slavery to freedom. Avadim Hayinu is the name of a Passover song. We were slaves. We. The rituals of Passover are designed to instill empathy. We are to taste their bitterness and weep their tears. As Rabbi Michael Lerner, the editor of Tikkun magazine, teaches, no wonder that the constant recounting of our own struggle for freedom has predisposed Jews to support the liberation struggles of other oppressed groups. Though I was born in the United States, my spirituality teaches that I am also the vulnerable immigrant. I am the foreigner who is so easily misunderstood, marginalized, and even victimized because of the differences in language, culture, and often skin color. Therefore, I have no choice but to do what I can to help liberate brothers and sisters from narrow places and attitudes, just as our story teaches that God helped to free my people from Egypt. Recently, a Christian religious studies major from North Carolina contacted me as part of an effort to reach out to rabbis throughout the country to gather feedback about our personal, emotional, and spiritual significance of the Passover holiday. My response was similar to what I've written here. The theology of empathy inspires the politics of social change. The young man wrote back that my email was the only one that mentioned social justice, and it was this type of connection which to him was a testament to the goodness of Judaism. I am surprised that my colleagues who did not mention empathetic justice as part of their Passover response, as I believe that this identification with the oppressed is at the heart of Passover. The charges against me and all of the protesters were dropped eventually. I did make it to the Seder of my mother-in-law and my family in time. And every time I looked at that table, full of the symbols of our journey from slavery to freedom, I saw also handcuffs. So those were the first two essays I chose to read from the left wing. It's kind of been really a great experience to reread these columns after 10 years. I stand by all of them. I've reread all of them. I stand by all of them. I'm glad to be able to put them back into the universe, I guess, on video. And I hope that they were interesting to you and edified to you. My friend Bobby is asking about James. because Bobby cares about people. That's sweet. If there's a synagogue in Macomb, and my answer is no, there's not. I've actually been to Macomb, Illinois. When I was a camp director, they had one of the best. I think it's Western Illinois University has one of the best camp fairs where people who are looking to work at summer camps come, and I interviewed people. They have a great outdoor education program, but they don't have a synagogue. I'm not sure if regular synagogue is a part of James's Jewish life, but the internet helps, and he writes me pretty often or regularly. So I actually used a different name for him in the column because he was still a young person, a minor. I changed his name to Timmy, and when I read it, just didn't ring true. I obviously didn't use his last name, but I decided to use his real name, or actually one of his real names, James, also Naga Bo, also Micah or Micha in Hebrew, for this reading. So I don't see any other questions or comments, but I'm glad you were with me. The people that I see that said hello were Melissa, Reverend Melissa, and Anthony, and Bobby, and Angela, and Bear, who is Midbar, and Ben. It's good to see you, Ben. Chag Sameach, and Bobby, and anyone else that watched live, or anyone else that will watch this via video. I'll be back. Oh, there's Sean. Oh, I'm glad, Sean. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Wow. I'll be back a week from today because of the end of Passover Yizkor on Thursday. And then from then on, unless something comes up, 2 days a week, Tuesday and Thursday at noon, it'll be about a half hour like this was. Couple announcements of CRC. Hey, Dawn. Dawn just had a baby. How's your baby? Oh, wow. Now they're rolling in. Karen, I feel like Mr. Rogers or something. Or who was it? The Romper Room. I see Karen and Dawn. Sorry about that. Couple of quick announcements. Today's Tuesday at 5:30. Rabbi Daniel will be right here in this spot doing his Talmud study. Hey, Paul. Hey, Julie. And then at 7, I'm teaching University Series. This month, the rabbis are team teaching University Series, so I'll give a little plug. Tune in at 7. And I'm teaching about the Omer and how it's connected to the season that we're in. I'm looking outside and I see purple flowers. So it's about springtime. It's about the Omer period after the second day of Passover. I'm really looking forward to it, and it'll end with the official Omer count, which we are doing every evening around 8:30. A different rabbi will give a short Omer message and then count the Omer. On Tuesdays, it'll be attached to University Series. On Friday, it'll be attached to Friday night services. On Saturday, it'll be Rabbi Susan, Rabbi Jim attached to their Havdalah. And the other days of the week, it'll be pretty much 8:30 coming at you. So, Dawn says, baby Nathaniel's sleeping next. I can't wait to meet him. And there was a note here about the closest synagogue to Macomb is probably Peoria. So thanks, Peoria, where Rabbi Dan and Rabbi Karen were once the rabbis. And they're now at CRC. I guess that's it. I'm going to sign out. And this has been a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to the next time, which is a week from Tuesday at 7 from the left wing. There's my left wing. And my hero, Lois Rubin, is on here. And take care, everybody. Have a great rest of Passover if you celebrate. And it's okay if you don't. Peace.